So we're going to start by making this a sacred place. We're going to do some opening words, and they will be on the screen for you. And Mary Turner will light our chalice. So please stand and say the italicized words. I will say the regular words. But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-beings. Not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you, Mary. So I would ask my team, if I'm really excited up here and forget something important, you can just yell at me or wave at me. So this is the third meeting in UU Lansing with respect to reparations and the Justice League of Greater Lansing. I think Willie was here just around the beginning of the pandemic. I was still on a hiatus and wasn't attending at that time. But we did a follow-up meeting in October. Many of you were there. And we promised to bring Willie and Prince. Prince is delayed. He has a very good reason for being delayed, but he's on his way, and hopefully he'll be joining us if he makes it. And the purpose of this meeting is to share as much information as we possibly can with you about the Justice League and about the concept of reparations. So I'm going to just briefly introduce Willie Bryan. Willie is the founder of the Justice League, and she's going to do our present. There we go. And so Willie's going to talk a lot about her work with the Justice League. So I asked her to tell us one thing about her that we wouldn't know. And so, Jim, you can test her mic.
Good afternoon. So, yes, I think the mic is doing great. Well, I am very excited to be here, and I'm excited to see you. And I appreciate your inviting us in and making us feel welcome. Mark had said to give you something that you don't know. I grew up in the Mississippi Delta. Does everybody know the Mississippi Delta? If I say Delta Blues, you probably know even more. And I am a classical biological control entomologist. I came to this area and I worked in Mississippi, in the Mississippi Delta, with biological control of row crop pests, specifically cotton, corn, soybeans, and moved into this area and working at Michigan State for the rest of my career. I had essentially done an early retirement and moved away from Mississippi to Michigan. You know, what made me do that is I look outside here, I go, wow, what was I thinking? But so I've been here quite a while, really. And we started the Justice League, now it's just been about 2.5 years ago. So I'm excited to be with you.
Thank you, Willie. So I'm going to just start with a little testimonial. I'm going to share with you my reasons for being a supporter of the Justice League. I know that white Americans owe reparations to Americans of African descent. I feel it in my bones because of my family history. And I'm going to share that family history with you. And one of the things that happens is when I talk about my family history, people react by feeling that my family must be uniquely responsible for the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. But what I'm going to be telling you is that that's really not true, because my family knows that all the other white families pretty much were just like our family. My father's father was Darrington Cheatham. My grandfather was Darrington. I think that's such a beautiful name. I wish they'd name me Darrington. Unfortunately, he was a fixer for the White Citizens Council, which was the legal arm of the Ku Klux Klan. He was a banker from Yazoo County, Mississippi, not far from where Willie was from. The bank got their fortune from cotton, in other words, the unpaid labor of African slaves. And his job for the White Citizen Council was to punish people who spoke up for civil rights. So if somebody complained to the sheriff that the sheriff should stop preventing them from voting, or if somebody wrote a letter to the paper saying that the schools should be integrated, Darrington's job was to punish them for that. And as the banker, the way he did that was he called in their loans. Many people were sharecroppers and they depended on credit to survive. So when he called in their loans, they would lose their land and their homes, and they would be forced into exile. And this happened many times. So if they joined the Great Migration and went north after having been run out of their homes, they might go to Oakland, California. That was one of the places they could have gone to. A lot of people did. And they might run into my mother's father in Oakland, Herbert. Herbert was a great champion of housing covenants, documents that he encouraged white families to sign, promising that they would never sell their home to an African American or a Jew, for that matter, because he was also a terrible anti-Semite. So Herbert kept Oakland segregated well into the 1960s and 70s, and both men together helped to maintain the racial wealth gap in this country. Excuse me. So you might be thinking, wow, Marcus, your family was really messed up. But they weren't. My two grandfathers were actually really kind men, and it creates a lot of cognitive dissonance for me, thinking about what they did during the day and how they treated me when they came home. And they thought of themselves as very enlightened and progressive people. Herbert, my mother's mother in Oakland, was actually one of the designers, a planner of the national park system in this country. He had a huge influence on that. So the next time you go camping, if you're in a state or national park, you can look at the way the layout is and think about my racist anti-Semitic grandfather who loved nature and experienced the same cognitive dissonance that I do. Most people don't know about their family history. The only reason that I know about it was because my parents, who were Unitarian Universalists, made a serious effort to learn about our family history, document it, and teach it to us children. The most distressing thing that they learned, which they talked about a lot with frustration in their voices, was that the other white families in the neighborhoods that we lived in really thought my grandfathers were great, and they admired them, and they deeply supported the work that they were doing. We often think of reparations as being about trying to find the bad people and punish them by fining them or their descendants. But what if it's not about bad individuals, but really about a system in which we all participated, willingly or unwillingly? What if we all participated in that system? Well, there's a well-blazed trail for dealing with situations like this, and that's reparations. As far back in history as we can see, when communities have had to deal with collective debt to correct a historical wrong, they have used reparations as a tool to do that. And Willie's going to tell us about this history here in a minute. But incredibly, in one of the clearest cases of historical wrong and collective debt, African Americans descended from slaves and victims of Jim Crow have largely not received reparations in the United States. One of the objections that people raise to the concept of reparations is that it just might not work. You know, what if UU Lansing gives $1,000 or $100,000 to the Justice League? Seriously, is it really going to close the racial wealth gap? And it's easy to think that way because us progressives and liberals have tried a lot of things that haven't worked out the way we promised that they would. And especially in this time of great political reaction, when we see a renewal of efforts to suppress the vote and to ban diversity education and to pull books on African American history off the shelves, really, can we go against that tide? I think about this very differently. I think about all the progress that has actually been made in spite of our struggles to make things work out the way we intend for them to. Communities like Mid-Michigan are really a lot nicer places for all of us to live in since the segregation, the housing discrimination, the job discrimination has to a large extent ameliorated. We have made a huge difference, and that difference has only happened because of effort, constant effort, even in the face of doubts and even in the face of setbacks. And the Justice League is a fantastic example of this effort. It's a local Lansing organization which has gained national recognition for the work that they're doing. They are achieving their goals. They have put Lansing on the map as a hot spot for social justice. And now they are reaching out to us. They're extending their hand and they're saying, will you please join us on this journey? And I ask, how could we not want to be a part of that?
Thank you, Marcus. That was inspiring. That's pretty nice testimony. I don't usually have that kind of testimony as we do these presentations, and so that's welcome. Very, very good information, and I'll be referring to, like, as Marcus said here in the presentation. So I'm with the, and Marcus has said, founder and current vice president of the Justice League of Greater Lansing, Michigan. We have been, we began in about 21, really. So it's been a fairly short time that we've been in existence. So let's just go right into talking about what we're going to share today, okay? Just let me give you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. the historical background on reparations, and Marcus did a good job of just laying that out. Are reparations needed for African Americans? And that's the kind of question that, again, Marcus was addressing. Are reparations even needed for African Americans? And then we want to talk about the racial wealth gap and how can we fix it, some solutions. And then we'll look at the model that the Justice League has put together. All right, so reparations for African Americans. Yes, so the main question that we want to answer today is, what are reparations? Reparations comes from the word repair. It means to make amends for historical wrong that has been done. And we all know some of these historical wrongs. I mean, there are examples. There are world examples. Germany. What happened to the Jews in Germany? And what did Germany do about it? Germany has paid reparations for the treatment of Jews in that country. Apartheid, South Africa. Again, reparations were paid to individuals who were victims of apartheid. They actually paid reparations and continued over the life of folk who were victims of apartheid. The U.S., we don't think of the U.S. as having done reparations, but we all know these examples, like the Japanese. We know what happened to this country during World War II. The American citizens who were of Japanese origin were, interned in camps. We know that, and so the U.S., in fact, in the 70s, designated a commission to study the effect of Japanese Americans what that internment did. And so it was decided that reparations would be paid. Each American citizen that had been interned was given $20,000. And one of the more important things that happened is the country apologized. The country apologized to its Japanese citizens. None of that has happened for African Americans. And we're going to talk about why it should happen for African Americans. So let's just go right into, why do African Americans need reparations? Let's just see if, now when we talk about this, I want you to think about impediments to wealth accumulation, because that's the key element here. I mean, we know when we're going to talk about slavery and the horrors of slavery and that whole piece. And the aftermath of that was that there was no wealth accumulation. So we want to think about why. And so that's what we'll go through. And as you see, each one of these elements, we'll think about why there were impediments. Slavery, we're going to talk about Homestead Acts, convict leasing, sharecropping, Jim Crow laws, GI Bill, redlining, and the destruction of black communities across this country. So remember, as we talk about these, remember each one of them were impediments to wealth accumulation for African Americans. So slavery, let's just start with that. America's original sin. Chattel slavery in the U.S. has been deemed one of the most brutal forms of slavery in world history. Because many times as we do these talks, you know, folk might say, well, you know, the U.S. is not the only country that has slavery. And so I hasten to add that chattel slavery was especially brutal, especially a huge impediment, obviously, to wealth accumulation. Folk of African descent were not allowed. They were owned, sold, and all of the horrors that went along with maintaining a system of enslaving other human beings. So, and to succinctly bring this home, I always like to point out that the U.S. is the richest country in the world, right? And the U.S. wealth was built on slavery. So, slavery eventually ended, right? After 246 years of enslavement, there was emancipation. 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, and what happened, right? We went to war over the enslavement of human beings. So the slavery ended, right? But there was no compensation for the free labor that had been provided to this country by African Americans. And so that's the story, is that there was, you know, free labor is one of the reasons this is the richest country in the world. When you don't have to pay labor, you're way ahead of the game, right? And so, you know, President Lincoln really tried to do that. He tried to compensate folk who had been formerly enslaved. In 1865, President Lincoln allocated 400,000 acres along the coast of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. These were southern states had been, these were the Confederate states. And so the Confederates had owned this land, so the president took the land, and the idea was to allocate it to formerly enslaved folk, give everybody 40 acres. This is the derivation of 40 acres and a mule. Everybody's probably heard of that, 40 acres and a mule. The idea was that every enslaved person, family would get 40 acres, and the Union Army talked about having a lot of mules. General Sherman said, you know, we have a lot of mules. We could give folk a mule as well. It never happened. Never happened. And it's important to remember too that the land was allocated. People were on the land. Some people were able to get on the land, start working the land. But you know, President Lincoln did not survive. President Lincoln was assassinated in April of 1865. So his successor, Johnson, in the fall of 1865, rescinded that action, took the land, put people off the land, literally took them off, and gave the land back to the former Confederate landowners. So that didn't work. Again, no compensation. This is a picture here, in fact, of folk coming to get the land that was allocated for the 40 acres. You know, when you think about that, you know, think about how if folk had been able to keep that land, the distribution would have been equitable. Folk would have had land, black people would have had land, white people had land. and there would, would not be the whole piece of not having any wealth, any way to accumulate wealth. All right, the Homestead Acts. The Homestead Act. Are you familiar with the Homestead Acts in terms of? Yeah, some people in here may have been recipients.
If you want the handout.
Some folk may have been recipients of this of the land that was passed on, because there were two Homestead Acts. One in 1862, which might not have been, wouldn't have been available to black people because enslavement was still the law of the land. But there was a second Homestead Act in 1866, which was after the war, not very long after, but it was after the war, and black people were eligible to be able to have some of this land. But what was the upshot of that? There were 246 million acres of western land. That first one was a western expansion, and the second one was a Southern Homestead Act. And 1.6 million white families, native born and immigrant, became landowners. Free land. All you had to do was make an application, pay a nominal application fee, which would have been about $20 an hour in today's money, go to the land, work the land, improve the land, stay on it for 5 years, and it's yours. That was it, right? However, what about African Americans? Only about 4,000 to 5,000 African Americans received found land patents, because you would get that found land patent at the end of the 5 years. You stayed on the land, improved it, and this is a representation of a sod house. You probably have seen these before, but that was what, folk took wagons, took their belongings, and went west, and then the second piece went south, did the southern expansion, and their land was then theirs. And freely, you could do whatever you wanted with it. So many people sold it as soon as the 5 years they got the found land patent. Many people kept it, of course, in their families, and they were able to then pass that land on, which is how we accumulate wealth. All right, convict leasing. Has anybody heard of convict leasing? You know what that is? Yes. Yes. This was a forced system of labor from prisoners, right? So, and they were, of course, overwhelmingly African American men. So what would happen, this system started after the emancipation, and lasted on up until World War II. That's a long time, nearly 100 years, right, of this lease. And so this is how that system kind of started out, is that black people had no land had been taken away, right? They had no jobs, they had no funds, and so that the law enforcement system came up with the idea to say if you didn't have a job, you were a vagrant. And if you were a vagrant, that was against the law, and you could be arrested. So that's what happened. Folks were arrested, put in jail, and then the farmers, corporations, businessmen would go to the jails, right? And they had a system that they worked out with the sheriff, the law enforcement. And this was the system. So it's like, these men are in jail. What is their sentence? And they couldn't pay their bail. They're here because they didn't have any money to pay their bail. So then the farmers or corporations would say, I'll pay their bail. You release them to me, this is their bail, and then I'll let them work it off. It became another system of slavery. because they kept folk enslaved using that system. Well, you haven't made enough money to pay me back, so you keep working. This system is chronicled in a book called Slavery by Another Name. You know that one? It's really, if you haven't seen it or read any of that, it's really a good read. It's a good accounting of that, again, very horrible system. And this system was much, even as brutal and sometimes even more so than slavery, because now they weren't protected property. You know, and during the enslavement period, folk would go, well, I'll beat him half to death, but I won't kill him, because then I'll kill my property off, and I won't have anybody to work the fields, right? In this system, this convict leasing system was brutal. Folk would be killed. I mean, if you refused to work, or if you tried to run away, or, you know, so it was like, there'd be no objection to just killing folk and say, well, he was trying to run away, or he wouldn't go to work this morning, or he didn't work hard enough. So in many instances, it was even as brutal, and sometimes even more so than the enslavement. This was, in fact, also the beginning of mass incarceration. Because what happened, when you look at that system, because most of the folk who were in jail with this system, this convict leasing system, were African American men. So when you gave those statistics, when you hear the statistics that 40% of people in jail are black, what does that say to you? It says, wow, black people are really criminals. What is the story? Why are so many black people in jail? This is the origin right here of folk being taken to jail for no reason other than greed and the opportunity to get free labor again. So today, there's 40% of the population in prisons are African American men. You add brown folk to that, the number becomes 60%. 60% of the population in jails today are black and brown individuals, and really started with this convict leasing system. Sharecropping, the next piece. Again, the unfair system of landowners sharing land with African American farmers, sharing, right? Marcus mentioned sharecropping. Again, this is a brutal system, another brutal system that started after Reconstruction. We know the Reconstruction period came after emancipation, lasted about 10 to 12 years, right? The Union Army left, chaos. Marcus's ancestors were out there enforcing that system, and that's the system that he was describing. And so this ideally would have been a system that could have worked. Again, missed opportunity. 60-40 sharing. Folk could have risen above the poverty piece if that system had worked. But the actuality of that system is that black sharecroppers never got any compensation for their labor. Nothing. Because it was a terrible system. Marcus described it earlier. What would happen is that sharecropping. The sharecropper went to the landowner. The landowner, they forced a corporation where the black farmers worked the land, brought in the crops, right? Then at harvest time, the idea was to share that, and it never happened. The white farmers, the landowners, would say, well, you know, Joe, I actually helped you out during the winter when there were no crops to work. So I signed a bill up at the store. You were able to buy flour. In fact, Joe, you owe me. So that sharecroppers, black sharecroppers, were in fact in debt to the white landowners And Marcus gave a great description of that. So if they complained, there was a system to thwart that. So it was really brutal, again, very brutal system. My father was a sharecropper. I'll give you a little personal testimony here. This was before I was born, but my father and my other siblings were all sharecroppers. I mean, my family were sharecroppers. You see the house behind me there? Let's see, yeah. The top photo, there's a house behind me. This was taken just 2 years ago. That's the house I grew up in. My father was a sharecropper who managed to save, on the side, he managed to save enough money to buy some land. See, the land that house is on, it cost $125. And he bought 2 lots. There's a house next door. And to bring this home for you, to show you the aftermath, the house below my house there is what my white counterpart's house would have inherited. This is what I inherited at the top. My father built a 3-room house. There are more than 3 rooms than what you're looking at, but he could add to it over the years. But this is what the sharecropper had. Below that is what the landowner's descendants could inherit. Let's move on. Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws was a system of laws and executive orders that legalized segregation and discrimination. So it's legal to say, you're not as good as I am, you can't live in the same place I live in, you can't make the same kind of money I live in, you can't be educated the same way I'm educated. Legal. It was legal. Again, another brutal system that kept up the tradition of slavery. Impediments to wealth. The GI Bill. The GI Bill of 1944. Everybody know about the GI Bill? We know what happened. That was discrimination. The government allowed discrimination in home mortgages, the allocation of the GI Bill. The GI Bill was passed after World War II to compensate folk who had served the country, right? What was the problem with it? Black people didn't get it. It didn't happen. When I've done these talks and talked to folks, generally somebody in the audience that says, what? What do you mean they didn't get it? My father got the GI Bill. My father was able to send me to college because he got a GI Bill. My father was able to go to college because he got a GI Bill. So you mean black veterans didn't get it? And that's so, for a long time that wasn't common knowledge. And by 1947, only 2 of 3,200 VA loans in 13 Mississippi cities went to black borrowers. Wasn't much better in the north, New York, New Jersey suburbs. Fewer than 100 of the 67,000 mortgages went to non-whites. Everybody know Levittown, the rise of suburbia. This happened, in hand with the GI Bill. So that the late 40s, early 50s is when the suburbs in this country were developed and established. And a lot of that goes hand in hand with the GI Bill. There was money. Veterans had money to be able to go to school, they could be educated, and they could get low-cost loans to build houses. Levittown is what a lot of these homes were called. There were others too. Levittown is one of the more popular ones. There were these suburban developments all over the country. and precipitated in many cases by the GI Bill. This is a picture of representation. It's a picture of Levittown. I think that these were started. He started building. The builder was named Levitt, William Levitt. He and his brother, and these started in New York and New Jersey and the North, and went around the country. And other developers did the same thing. So what would happen here is that the veterans could get loans. These houses were turnkey ready. They had appliances, they were furnished, you could go in. And the difference was that not only were African American veterans not getting loans, but also if they had the ones that might have gotten the loan, the few that got it, they would be turned down for a couple of reasons. Well, turned down because the government allowed discrimination. And the builders would refuse to sell their homes to black people. So William Levitt just said, I'm not selling my house to black people. Forget it. Don't come in here asking. That's it. So these houses that you see are still in existence today. These were just built in the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s. So these houses are still there, improved. These houses cost, when they built them, about $7,000 to $9,000. Today, these houses, as you look at them, and you know these developments, you know, the suburbs is where you grew up. If you grew up there, did you have neighbors that were black? Did you see black people in these suburban areas? You didn't. And not only that, this is the period of white flight as well. So not only did the suburbs rise, folks left the cities, took the tax base, left, went to suburbs, took the schools, built new schools, you know. So this is the history we're talking about. This is the history that has put us to where we are now, talking about reparations. So the suburban areas have the history of being segregated. There just were no black families there. Another impediment. So then, the next one we're going to talk about, redlining. People are much more familiar with, and everybody in the room probably knows what redlining is today. When I a few years ago, I started talking about redlining. It was new information to folks to learn that the government had allocated to mortgage lenders, real estate developers, that black people were not to be sold houses in certain areas of cities. So this map here is an example of what redlining is. The real estate developers would actually just take a pen, a marker, and go through and mark green was the best area. This is where white people would be given loans to buy a house. This is a map of Lansing and East Lansing. This is East Lansing here. This is Lansing. So then blue, it's still okay. You could sell to white people there. Yellow, starting to decline. Be careful. And then red was considered hazardous. And white people would be steered away from buying homes in this area. Black people would be steered toward buying homes in this area. So the real estate developers would just say, black person came in, and they have money, right? Come in and say, I want to buy land here or here. This is Moores River Drive. This is the area here over by Moores River Park. this is the East Lansing area here. These red zones is where a black person went in and said, I'd like to buy some land, I want to get a mortgage. They'd say, yeah, you don't want to buy over here. Let me take you to where the best place for you. And so they would steer folk and put many times there's environmental racism and problems going on, but this is where they would sell the land. Do you see this map here? What did I say? This is East Lansing. What's the difference? Somebody tell me the difference between East Lansing and Lansing. What does that mean? Yeah. That black people would not be sold land in East Lansing. Somebody said sundown town. I heard that term growing up, and I didn't really realize I thought it was a term that I only heard in my household. I didn't realize it was a term that was applied to areas where black people didn't want to be after sundown. So what happened in East Lansing is that black people were not sold homes. You couldn't get a mortgage to buy a home in East Lansing until 1968. That wasn't so long ago, 1968. And so that was when the Fair Housing Act was passed, and black people could then start to buy houses. Mark has mentioned that those covenant lease, where you would put in the deed, you can't sell this house to black people. You can't sell this house to people that were Jewish. So the property could, would stay white, right? So that language is still in many deeds, and in fact, there's been legislation to try and get that out. Because folks, you can't enforce it; it's not being enforced. But who wants that in their deed? So again, an impediment to wealth. The next one we'll talk about is the destruction of black communities. We know that history. We know the history of towns that there were several towns that were like all black, wealthy, wealthy not by the same standards that we'd be looking at wealth in white America, but land communities that were thriving, that was literally destroyed for various reasons. We have an example here in our area, the destruction of a black community in the greater Lansing area to bring in a highway. And that also happened all over the country. Urban renewal, the construction of highways, and they were brought right through African American communities, thriving communities, and they did not have to be brought into that community. They didn't have to destroy that. Many routes could have been done, but systematically throughout they were brought right through. We can touch it and feel it right here in Lansing. The area that is now 496 was a thriving, parts of it were a thriving African American community. Businesses, homes, churches, the list goes on, that were predominantly, and all, this is a business, all African American. Destroyed, folk land taken away in eminent domain for the highway. Folk had no place to live. They were not given the proper value of their homes, and we know that story. There are many famous ones. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood, Florida. The list goes on. Urban renewal is another method. The destruction of African American communities. All right, so, this is not an exhaustive list, by the way. It's a list of, the idea would be to pick out some that we could, folk could visualize, or you could talk about. The list is a lot longer than of the kinds of destruction that happened to the black communities and to and black people historically. So, what all of that, what we just looked at, what all of that has done is created what was known as a racial wealth divide. Wealth can be understood as the sum total of what a family owns minus what it owes. A family's wealth accumulation is the amount of wealth that they inherit from their families. We just been talking about why black people did not inherit anything from their families. We talked about why I didn't inherit the same thing that my white counterparts inherited from their families. So that it created this racial wealth divide, and it's a structural problem. It's in the system now. And so we have to then use structural means to solve the problem. Let me give you just a graphic real quick to show you what happens when there's no wealth accumulation. Here, this is over a 30-year period, this graph shows. So here, the left two, you can see it's all of the folk in the country, everybody in the country, black, white, indifferent. And so this represents median household wealth, not income, but median. And so that about in 2016, we had about 81,000 is household wealth in families. The next set, we have separated out white and black. Okay. And so you can see that in 2016, there's about $150,000 in just median household wealth. That's a white family. What does it look like for black families? It's really, the word that comes to mind for me is obscene in terms of the difference here. Look at that. The difference in here, 2016, $3,500, and what we have here in the white families. So that's just a graphic of what it looks like if you graph it out. So we've laid it out. So we want to move to, what can we do about it? Can we fix it? Can we address it? We don't have to not talk about it. And there are solutions. So the Justice League would like to talk to you about that, to talk to you about how can we fix this. We looked at what would be solutions. And of course, the best solution would be to have the government do it, right? As they did with the Japanese. The best solution, the next slide shows that there is a bill in Congress today. It's called H.R. 40. Everybody's heard about it. John Conyers, our own John Conyers here from Michigan, right, introduced this bill in 1989. John reintroduced this bill every year. He reintroduced it. This was coming out of John's committee, a House Appropriations Committee John was serving on, right? Every year. John passed away in 2019. The bill had never left committee. It never got out. John tried every year. So after John's death, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee came, took the bill up and reintroduced it. So it got a modicum of movement after John's death. So in 2021, the bill left committee, made it to the floor of the House, and the next line is, it's still there. It's still on the floor of the House, not made any progress, but it did get out of committee. There is renewed interest in moving this bill, getting it through the House to the Senate. There is renewed interest. There's a call for faith-based groups to, and all, all groups, but faith-based groups are one that we highlight, trying to get this bill, to be passed in the House. That would be the best solution, but that hasn't happened. 30 years, John brought it. It has not happened. So, what would be a possible solution? We, with the Justice League, thought we don't have to sit on our hands. We can do something. We are people who are mobile, who can right the wrong, who can, repair the breach. And so early in 2021, we started to talk about it and say, we don't have to sit and go, ain't it awful? It's terrible what happened. It's terrible that Marcus's ancestors said, I'm going to punish you if you try and change this system, So what do we do? We figure, well, we don't want to make Marcus feel bad. We don't want to talk about something that we can't do anything about, so let's not talk about it. And the Justice League said, that might be the solution. Let's talk about it. Let's see what we can do. Let's get off our hands. And we proposed a faith-based approach to reparations. Reparations is a solution that was started after the Emancipation Proclamation. I mean, it was always there, so it's not this is nothing new. 400 years we've been trying to do, so we wanted to address it again. So we incorporated my associate, Prince Salas, who's serving as the president of the Justice League, has interest in sharing with us today as well, and would be interested in coming to us and talking about. He's in the back, trying not to be seen back there, but what I'd like to do is have Prince come in and I'll hand off the baton, and he can talk about the development of the Justice League and what that means for what we can do, what that means for us being able to not sit on our hands, and how can we do it. So I would like Prince to tell you that story. So I want to hand off to Prince, and I just had this up here. It might be helpful.
He's working the slides from back there, so if it doesn't advance, you wait.
All right, sounds good. Good morning, folks. All right. Good afternoon. I want to start by saying it's been a real honor to serve underneath Willie Bryan's leadership in getting this project going. I've lived in Lansing my whole life. I'm 33 years old, lived here for 32 years, and this is by far one of the most powerful projects that I've ever been involved in. And I think when you're as passionate about this work, you begin to live it, eat it, breathe it, and all of that. So I just want to thank you for your leadership. So the vision statement for the Justice League. The Justice League of Greater Lansing, Michigan has cemented our commitment to healing and becoming the beloved community by making the connection between faith and racial justice in the form of reparations. In the Greater Lansing area, reparations will be committed mainly from predominantly white houses of worship as part of their efforts to repair the breach caused by centuries of slavery, inequality of wealth accumulation, and the failure to live into God's plan of equality for all of humanity. And so next we're going to look at the actual model. So what we've noticed over the past few years and being intentional about this work is that there are several types of reparation models that are taking place. You may have heard about what's taking place in Evanston, Illinois. California has a blueprint for reparations. There is the University of Michigan and partnering colleges that are also striving towards solutions to help repair the breach. So what makes the Justice League very unique is that it is a faith-based model. And so what that means is that we seek to develop a network of predominantly white houses of worship from the greater Lansing area to create a reparations endowment fund to make amends for the historic wrongs perpetrated on the African American community. Repairing the breach is what we live by and what we live into. And there's a scripture. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. Isaiah 58:12. I think in being in this work behind the scenes, we can see how we are adding to and being the catalyst for repairing the breach in a multitude of ways. Of course, reparations, right, to help repair the wealth inequities that we see within communities. In addition to that, I also see the repairing of friendships and communities amongst different denominations that are involved in this work. Those who are also part of the secular community, those who are interested in social justice, racial justice, but may not be in a church. So it is it's a beautiful thing to witness and be a part of, this repairing of the breach process. Securing funds, 4 primary ways: church endowments, personal contributions, estate planning, and asset donations. We are very excited to say that we've been able to check off these boxes in one form or another since we've started this process. So why church endowments? What we've understood in doing this work is that a lot of churches, many churches, have directly and indirectly benefited from the complicity within the legacy of slavery, right? And so it's been very hard historically to move an entire ecclesial body to verbally stand behind the support of abolishing slavery or repairing the breach necessarily. So a lot of churches have directly and indirectly benefited from the legacy of slavery and its aftermath. And so that is, one of the options. And so we've had several churches who have pulled from their endowments saying, hey, we understand what you're doing. We appreciate the approach. And, again, that's one option. Personal contributions from people like yourself. We've had someone also write the Justice League into their estate planning, which is a real honor. So that is another option. And then you see asset donation. So these are all options as to how both persons from the church and from the secular community can get involved and contribute to the work that we're doing. Okay. Suggested use of funds. So the Justice League is focused on 3 core areas: housing, education scholarships, and grants for African American owned startup businesses. We're excited to say that our advisory council is working around the clock to help allocate our first leg of reparations for this year, and that's going to be in education and scholarships. So we're focused on these 3 core areas. This is the blueprint that we've created, and so this is the focus when we think back to what Willie talked about, the things that prevented African Americans from accumulating wealth, such as a home, right, which has a huge impact on intergenerational wealth, business, education. So the things that were prohibited are the things that we're trying to feed into, especially living in this capitalistic society, right? So trying to repair the breach and restore the streets that we live in. So housing, education scholarships, and grants for African American owned startup businesses. Okay. So who will help manage the funds? We have brought together, I'd like to say, an elite group of activists within the greater Lansing area who are really dedicated to making this project work. So our advisory council is made up of African Americans from different community sectors in the greater Lansing area. You may recognize one of these council members that are sitting amongst you. She is a giant, Miss Betty Sanford. Yeah. You know, it's really an honor to have Miss Sanford a part of this project. I've known the Sanford since I was about 15, 16 years old, and just how life has come full circle. One of the things I really appreciated when I was 16 years old and I'd come over and I'd dust books and help clean and things like that was their library. And it was just full of, you know, different topics that just stirred my soul. And so some of those topics, you know, talked about the same work that we're doing today. So it's really interesting how it all interlays. So this is our council, Mr. Tony Willis from LEAP. We have several pastors on board, a historian from MSU. We have someone who works in the LGBTQ community at MSU as well. And so we try to have just a strong, diverse board. All right, so some of the goals that we were able to meet between 22 and 23. We were able to elect our officers. We were able to elect our board of directors. We named our advisory council. We opened up a bank account with a Black-owned bank called Liberty Bank that's based in Detroit, Michigan. We also launched our website and we designed our logo. Above all, we were approved as a federal nonprofit by the IRS. So we've been working very consistently, very strategically, and some of those seeds have come into fruition over the past year and a half. So we're very proud of this work. Here is a glimpse of our leadership team, myself, serving as president, our founder, Willie Bryan. We have a new treasurer this year, Mr. Ross Yednock, and we have our new secretary, Ms. Peggy Roberts, who is with us today. And thank you for the Justice League members who came out to support today as well. So this is our leadership team of our officers delving into 2024. This next slide that you're looking at is a small snapshot of our board of directors. We have Ms. Peggy Von Payne from Northwest Initiative, Reverend Stanley Jenkins, who is the pastor at Lansing First Presbyterian Church. That was the first church to actually make a pledge toward the Justice League's reparations model and project. He's very involved. There's Dr. Nakia Parker, who's a historian at MSU, Reverend Sean Holland, who's the pastor of Epicenter of Worship here in Lansing, and Mr. Jack Roberts, who's also with us today. All right, moving right forward, some focal points to keep in mind. That we're keeping our focus local on the 100,000 African Americans in the greater Lansing area. Keep in mind it's repair, not an investment with expectation for personal return. It's not charity. And that's hard for us to sometimes detach from, you know, living in our culture. So this is true repair. Our fundraising goal by the end of 2024 is to raise $1 million. So we're, you know, striving toward that. And then, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we will be doing a distribution, our first distribution this year. So we're moving right along to do scholarships. And that's going to be, there'll be more information coming out about that, but that's going to happen this summer. So again, these are just some focal points to keep in mind, and also a little bit of our progress. So we found a really interesting balance with this work. It's not just within the church, but it's so important that we build partnership and collaborations in the community. And I mentioned earlier, it's been great serving underneath Willie because, my heart and joy is being in the community. And so underneath this umbrella, I've really been able to spread my wings and fly in a subject that is so meaningful and personable to me, not only because I'm the descendant of enslaved African Americans, but because I grew up in Lansing and I love this city, right? So it makes it that much more at home. So one of the things we've done in this community is we've offered an apology to the African American community for the sin of slavery and its legacy. We were able to gather support from 10 plus churches in the greater Lansing region who came together on January 28th of 2023 to offer an apology to the African American community. The apology was issued by PCUSA. The official title is called Litany of Repentance. It's very vivid. It's very emotional, and it's very honest, right? And that's where we start. So we offered that apology at the Lansing Reach Out Christian Center, which is a predominantly African American church here in the city of Lansing. Yes? Sure. So would you mind raising your hand if you've participated in one of the apologies that we've put together? Oh, that's awesome. Good point, Marcus. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marcus. That was helpful. This here is a snapshot of us at the apology. We held it this past summer on Juneteenth. Felt that it was very befitting. And this is, of course, the founder in her Justice League swag. The next photo is of myself. One of the things we try to do is just make sure that persons across all sectors of the community are aware of the work that we're doing. And Michigan State Senator Sarah Anthony has been a true supporter. On this particular day, she was in between meetings, but we gave her enough advance notice where she marched right down the Capitol steps and spoke to the people and just reminded us that the work that we're doing is purposeful and it's needed. And so we appreciated that. So again, just continuing to build relationships. This is our ardent supporter of the Justice League. This is my mom. It was, it's so great to have your parents at these types of groundbreaking, opportunities. As she gets older, you find creative ways to keep your parents involved in your life. And I think that she was just, instrumental in just being here, her presence and whatnot. And of course, she's rocking the Justice League swag. Yeah. All right, so this here is a photo of myself, Willie, and Amy, who serves as the moderator at Edgewood United Church of Christ. And this was August of last year. And so it's a photo showing the support, the love, and of course the monetary support to the endowment that Edgewood has made. And we'll talk, more specifics about what that looked like. But this is just showing the support that's come out of Edgewood. Again, another picture that's illustrating the support that's come out of All Saints Episcopal Church. In this photo, you have, again, myself, Willie, a few members from Lansing First Presbyterian Church. You have the pastor of All Saints, Pastor Kit Carlson, Reverend Krista Hewitt. And so this was a very momentous day to be able to join that congregation, understand the work and the thought that has gone into how and why they decided to participate in this notion of reparations. And what we'll discuss at a later time is that there is no cookie cutter approach to this type of work. Most recently, there was a check presentation at Sycamore Creek that's pastored by Tom Arthur. And that is a Methodist church that's located off of Lake Lansing Road. It's interesting because we've simply planted seeds along the way. And I really feel like we're at a point now where we're starting to see that kind of, grow. So this is Sycamore Creek showing their support. Their congregation prayed for us. And what I think is so important to remember is that, this is just the photo, but there's so much work that goes on internally behind the scenes with members of the church and their different committees to make this happen. Cake, anyone? This is our fall celebration that we had on November 3rd. Some of you were there. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your support. This was a great way for us to just bring our family and friends and churches together to go over the progress and remind you that, your support is necessary and we appreciate it. Okay. All right. And so next, looks like yes, I see that. So how would we like to do this? And maybe I can give a brief intro to the video before we start. Okay, and then I take it that you're controlling the sound back there, right, sir? Okay, great. All right, so this is a 2-minute video. It's a brief introduction to the Justice League. It's going to highlight some of the moments that we had at the apology that I talked to you about that was held on January 28th of last year. And just an overview of the work that we've been doing. So with that being said, I will let my friend in the back play the video. And please let me know if there's anything I need to do on my end.
The idea for the Justice League started a long time ago with me in my quest to be a change agent in my community. And the Presbyterian Church has its national meeting. One of the initiatives put forth at that meeting was an apology to African Americans in this country for slavery.
I've always been involved with community development, community engagement, and so it was a natural inclination when Willie Bryan called me one day and said, "Hey, this is a project that I'm working on. What are your thoughts?"
As white Christians, we repent of our complicity in the belief in white supremacy. We have turned our backs and walked away, pretending not to see. Yet we saw, pretending not to know. Yet we knew.
I've been struck by the responses from my colleagues in the church and in the audience, especially among the black members of the audience, my black colleagues, how moving it was.
I want you to know we really appreciate it. You didn't have to do it, but you did. And I want you to know I thank you all, every one of you that came up here and said you were sorry. You thought enough to get up, had the decency, had the courage to get up and say, we're sorry. We're sorry what we did, what my forefather did to you. We're sorry. And I thank God for you.
To realize that my black brothers and sisters and fellow clergy people have been waiting to hear this brings it home in a different way. It's a liberating thing to name the demon.
Thank you. So this is community engagement. This is what it's looked like over the past 2.5, 3 years. Yeah, there's so many thoughts and emotions when I look at that video and just the day of that event. And you just, when I looked around the room, I saw professors, I saw mentors of mine, I saw people who've done scholastic work in these fields of study. And it was just like, wow, how cool to see community come full circle and to be a part of this moment. So thank you, UU, for your participation. Give yourselves a round of applause. Yeah. Support comes in a myriad of ways. I think personally what has helped the Justice League gain so much momentum has been this organic approach to having liaisons, to sharing the work and the progress of what we're doing with their church or with their community center or with their organization. And so, the lists we're looking at in front of us are churches that have supported in a myriad of ways, in addition to, monetary contributions. But this here is just kind of an overview of the churches that have been involved, that have, as an understatement, have done the work internally, and have maybe been sitting on the work for many years and have had the dialogues and read the books and participated in community and believe that the work that we were doing served as a catalyst for them to participate. And so these are churches that have just actively participated, again, monetarily, but also in other ways like community engagement. If you'd like more information about the Justice League, you can visit that website that we created last year. It's at www.justiceleagueglm.org. And of course, if you'd like to send us an email, you can do so by sending it to justiceleagueglm@gmail.com. And of course, I can share that information with Marcus, who can probably share that with you all. There are 2 upcoming events that I want to share with you really quickly. Excellent. So the first event is going to be held on January 18th, 7 p.m., and it's going to be at the Communication Arts and Science building at MSU. This is going to be a film screening followed by a panel discussion. The film screening is called The Cost of Inheritance. It's hosted by WKAR, and it is about an hour film that is looking at how reparations is taking place at the national scale and what it looks like from the community vantage point and how people are getting involved. We were asked by the senior DEI director at WKAR to participate in this panel discussion based on the work that we are doing here at the local level. So we want to extend that invite to you all if you'd like to see that film, be a part of community, and or engage with the panel discussion following. Okay. And again, we can share more information about that. In fact, I think there's flyers being handed out now. The second event will be held on February 28th. This is a collaboration we're doing with the East Lansing Public Library. The topic of discussion is, how did we get here? And I think what Willie and I have recognized from serving behind the scenes, again, that there is no cookie cutter approach to seeing how churches are participating or seeing how people from the community are participating. So to open up the discussion and to have different churches explain how they got to the point to where they were willing to participate, what was their approach? There's lots of meetings that happen outside of our peer view, whether it be racial justice committee, social justice committee, a session board. So there's all these different things that happen that lead up to, this participation piece. So I want to invite you to be a part of that discussion, to be able to hear from other churches and panelists like Edgewood United Church, Lansing First Presbyterian Church, All Saints Episcopal, Red Cedar Friends, hear from them about their journey to get to the point as to how they chose to participate. Okay. Okay, excellent. And so there is a UU Lansing / Red Cedar Friends screening of They Took the Dirt, which is about the I-496. Okay, and that's going to be hosted at Red Cedar Friends. It looks like the date is still to be determined, but that's an awesome.
You can repeat what I said. The interesting thing is the Red Cedar Friends have invited us to go to them because they want to collaborate with us.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you heard that. So Marcus said that Red Cedar Friends has invited UU to join them in watching this film as an invitation to be in this work together. So that's very beautiful. Awesome. And I see some folks from Red Cedar today. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to extend those invites to you and thank you. Thank you so much. Okay.
So what I want to do is look to my fellow organizers of this meeting. We are at 90 minutes now. You've been sitting a long time. We had planned on having a freewheeling discussion for about 45 minutes at this point. And as you can see, we were set up to take notes. But you might be ready to leave. And if you're ready to leave, what we can do is Randy Scott and Mary Turner are prepared to lead us in a closing song with the words on the board. And then those who want to stay, can we just hang out as long as we want to afterwards and talk about strategy? Or do we need to vacate the building? No. So we can hang out? Okay. All right. So here's the song. When I lift my voice, notice before we start singing, there's a first verse, and then you skip down and do the chorus, and then you go back up and do the second verse, and then you go down and do the chorus. And I'm telling you that because it's a short song, so we'll probably have to do it 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, this is from the Justice Choir Songbook, and which came out in 2016. I don't know if all of you know about that, but it's a collaboration of musicians to create music that you can pop out and sing at a protest. So keep this in your back pocket because you're going to learn it today. We're going to start with the refrain, which is at the bottom when they try to divide us. We'll play through the whole thing, and you can jump in when you're ready.
How fast you want to go?
Sounds good. Yeah. Please divide us. I lift my voice. Let's do it again. When we try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice. When I lift my voice, let it be in song, a divine tone of the face of wrong. When I stand alone, side by side, we'll lift always justified. They try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice, second time, second verse. When I lift my voice, let it be for good. Let me care as much as I know I should. I won't stand alone, we'll stand side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice again. I lift my voice. Thank you.
So we will hang out. If people have questions, want to talk about next steps, we'll be here. So thank you so much for attending.